Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live with GAE. I am Lisa Morgan, a kindergarten teacher and president of GAE.
I'm Sharon Doe. I'm a high school physics teacher in Augusta, Georgia, and I'm the current vice president of the Georgia Association of Educators.
And I'm Carly Shaw, and I am a physical science eighth grade teacher in Fulton County, and I'm the current secretary treasurer of GAE.
And I get to introduce our special guest this week. Peggy Cochran is our interim executive director. She has been with us since September and will be with us for a few more weeks. And we are thrilled to have her with us this evening. And she has such a long history in public education and also the association. So, Peggy, tell us a little bit about how you came to be here with us in Georgia.
Well, I was asked by NEA to come because you had requested of NEA that they supply you with an interim executive director. I have done this before, and they contacted me and said, in fact, they contacted me like on right before Labor Day and said, can you be there next week? And I said, well, yes, I can. So on that weekend, in fact, I spent time, first of all, about 3 hours talking with Lisa. And then we added the other two officers, and then we spent about 3 hours talking again. So we decided that we were compatible. We could get along with each other. And I packed up and headed your way. And I've been here since September the 15th. And it's been an excellent experience. I've enjoyed working with the officers. I've enjoyed working with the staff here, and there's a lot of work to do, but we've been all a great team and getting it done. And I'm just as happy as I can be that we've been able to progress the way we have. And I'll talk specifically about some of that later, but pretty much that's how I got here. And I had been the executive director in Missouri for the Missouri NEA for many years. And I had retired once in 2006. Then I went back in 2012 and worked 3.5, almost 4 more years, and then retired again. My husband had Alzheimer's, and I needed to be home with him. And then he was in a nursing home, and he passed away. And after that, when Jim Testerman called and said, Peggy, can you go work in some states as executive director? I thought it was an excellent opportunity and jumped at the chance. So that's how I'm doing these jobs. Yes.
Well, we're certainly glad that you're here.
Thanks.
Can you tell me what made you leave the classroom and want to go work for NEA?
I started teaching when I started college when I was 16, and went through college in 3 years, got my bachelor's degree. So I was 19 when I got my bachelor's degree, and I started teaching. Somebody says, what were you doing with, well, to be honest with you, I was rushing through life, trying to get out of the cotton fields of Southeast Missouri. We lived on a sharecropper's farm, and I had to, my father didn't have any sons at that time, and he always said, you can do anything a man can do, and we did. We helped, we fed animals, we butchered animals, we drove tractors and trucks, and we chopped cotton and picked cotton, and just did all the wonderful kinds of things that you do on a farm. And I say wonderful. I have never gone back to experience that wonderful thing again, but I was trying to get out of that cotton field. And so my rush was to do that. So I started teaching when I was 19, and that was a time, it was 1964, and it was a time when there was no such thing as, especially down in southeast Missouri, there was no such thing as special education. So we had kids, and it was also a time when you could draw welfare on kids, however many kids you have, and if they were in school up to they were 21, you could draw welfare on them if they were special. So I had two kids my first year that I taught who were older than I was. That was quite an experience. And then a lot of kids, because I taught mostly sophomore English, juniors, and seniors when I was teaching journalism and debate. And I had several kids who were like a year younger than I was. So that was my entryway. And then, of course, my husband got his degree, and we needed two English positions, and there wasn't another one there. And so we had to go find another place to teach. I'll tell some of that story later. But anyway, we both were in the English department, started teaching, and and then 2 years after that, we moved up near St. Louis, and both had English positions in Northwest, which is in Jefferson County, right underneath St. Louis. And I worked actually 17 more years there. So I had worked for 21 years as a teacher one time before, and I had been very active in the association. And so I'd been president, I had been the chief negotiator, I had been the grievance chair, I had been the PAC chair, we had done just about everything. And I volunteered to be on the state performance-based evaluation committee for the State Department of Education to write the first performance-based evaluation, and helped do that. And then they gave me release time to travel around with another an administrator. We were like a team and went around all over the state training both teachers and administrators about the new evaluation system. And when I finished that tour around the state, I had decided that I was going to run for vice president of the association. I was on the board of directors for the state. I decided to run for vice president, and I lost by 5 votes. And I was heartbroken. And the executive director came to me along with the assistant executive director of Missouri NEA, and they said, well, we just want to tell you that we're kind of glad you lost that election. And I thought, well, what a mean, nasty thing to say. I mean, here I am heartbroken, and and they said, no, we've got a job. We've got a job just for you. We want you to come and be a UNICEF director and whatever. And I had thought about it before. In fact, once before it had been offered to me, but my children were little, and I decided I couldn't leave them to do that. But this time I thought, if I don't do it now, I was 40 years old. If I don't do it now, I won't do it. So I made the decision and all this time, you need to know that I was the person, the go-to person in the district, in the buildings to fix it. Whatever it was, people would come to me and they would tell me their story, and then they'd say, Peggy, we know you can go fix it. And sometimes they say, please go fix it, but don't use my name. Well, that was a bit, it's hard to do that when you can't even cite the specific instance that you're trying to correct. But anyway, I'd always done that. And I thought, one of the best things that I can do for the rest of my life is to make sure that people in public education, educators, have better working conditions than they have right now. And that was the reason I decided to leave and to start working for Missouri NEA and become a UNICEF director. And I've never looked back. I have always, the thing I think I missed most, I missed two things most. One, I missed the kids because I loved it. I loved teaching, and I had drama and debate and the clubs. I always was there after school helping and doing all those kinds of things. And the second thing I missed was, at the end of a semester, because I had semester classes, okay, not a year-long class. At the end of a semester, you always finished. You finished it. You got everybody's grades done, you turned them in, and you were ready to start over again. When I started working as a UNICEF director, and to this day, in all of this work, we never finish. We always have 14 things going on all at once, and you meet the deadlines, you finish what you got to finish, but you never finish everything because there's always that calendar that's got you down the road that you've got 20 more things to do within the next, and it doesn't end at the end of school. And it doesn't end, you don't have, quote, a summer off. You don't get those well, I never had a summer off anyway, and most teachers don't most educators don't. We work somewhere doing something, whether we were designing curriculum or my husband worked at Six Flags. I worked in a drugstore just trying to make ends meet with 3 children. And so, yeah, we had a little bit of a different place to work. It was a little bit of a break. And, but that was it. I loved it. I was hooked. I loved helping educators, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
I have a question for you, Peggy, and it's great to have you here with us.
Thank you.
What advice would you give someone who was interested in maybe being a UNICEF director or aspiring to be one?
I think the first thing, and I think this is what prepared me, is to get involved. Get involved in your local association. You don't have to start at the top. Start as a building rep, because there's great training for building reps, and building reps get to experience all kinds of things, but it's not a difficult job. And we certainly want most of our, when we are interviewing somebody, let's say to be a UNICEF director, we look at what they've done back in their local. And then as you go from being a building rep, look at becoming the, PAC chair, or look at becoming an officer, look at being on the board of directors of your local association. And the next thing you need to start doing is looking at the state association. What does the state association need? As Sharon and you and Lisa have stepped up to be part of the state association. We've got a wonderful group of board members here in Georgia who have stepped up to be part of the state association. And so those kinds of things are the kinds of things that prepare you to be able to do the job of UNICEF director. Along the way, you learn about legislation, you learn the terminology, you learn to watch out for this, you learn what your rights are, you learn what you think your rights are, but they may not be. I can remember, when I first started as a UNICEF director, because we had fought a lot of battles back in my school district, and we had a policy that if you were going into a meeting with your administration and you felt any kind of need, you could have a witness go with you. Well, I always thought that was a right you had, and I do believe it's a right that you have, but it wasn't a legal right that you had, that we had. And so, you have to learn too that some of those things, you may have to make it work. We had lots of years where we bargained in our school district, but we did not have a collective bargaining law at that time. But we just set up a process and said, okay, here we need to sit down and talk to you about some things, working conditions and about our salaries. And if you don't want to talk to us, we'll talk to the media and talk about some things that you might rather hear yourself first, you know? And guess what? They came to talk. And then from then on, you start just moving them in the right direction, you know, and that's what we did. Sometimes we had to push a little, but after they learn that you mean what you say and you say what you mean and you tell the truth and you're being transparent and it's obvious sometimes that they are not, then you learn how to deal with that. And so that's what we did. We made grievance procedures when we didn't have one in board policy, but we took the chain of command and we made a grievance procedure out of it. And the same thing with bargaining. We made bargaining happen when there wasn't a policy or a law. And we just pushed a little, a gentle push, and made some things happen. And in some places it didn't work for a while, but you know, eventually it did. And we had lots of persistent people who I think if you continue, you just have to be resilient. You know, if you get pushed back one time, you come back and you say, I think you should reconsider, you know, blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of what we did. And that's how I got to be a UNISERV director. And then I was a UNISERV director for 3 years and the position of assistant exec came open. And I didn't necessarily think I would get it, but I thought, you know, I believe in myself. I believe I could do this job. And I applied for it. And out of many people who applied, I got the job. And again, then the next thing that happened is 3 years later, the executive director position came open. And there had never been a woman hold that position, and there had never been a Missouri teacher hold that position. We had imported men from out of state. Now, some of them may have been teachers, but they weren't Missouri teachers. And so, you know, one of the things that we did was we said, there comes a time someday when a woman and a Missouri teacher can run this organization. And I believed that I was the one who could do it. So I decided to apply and got the job. And then I was there first time for almost 16 years and retired so I could travel with my husband who had already retired. He taught school for 35 years. And then I went back to work. After I'd been retired for 6 years, I went back for almost 4 years and did executive in Missouri, did the executive director's job again, and then left because of my husband's illness. So it was a wonderful experience for the most part. I learned a lot. I loved it a lot. I helped a lot of people. I still have great memories about that experience.
So you talked about your teaching, your organizing, your bargaining. Can you choose or name one accomplishment out of all of those years of work that just makes you proud?
I think I have two things. When I first became a UNISERV director, one of the things that, one of the trainings that I went through that NEA gave us, they had a training that talks about you kind of have to push the envelope some. You should be prepared that there will be times when, you know, somebody might call the police on you and have you arrested because you're on the school district property, you know, or whatever. So that was part of a training that we had. So one of the first people that called me to be helped was a lady who had taught school for 29 years in a small town in Missouri. And she had, all of a sudden, she'd always had good evaluation. She'd always gotten along with everyone. Her husband was a counselor in the school. And so what she did was, all of a sudden she got a very bad evaluation, and she was bumfuzzled. She couldn't understand why. And when she went to meet with her principal, he told her she was going to get a non-renewal letter. And the biggest thing that was on there is they said she used too many movies, or, showed too many movies in her classroom. But when she checked with the librarian, which is where you had to get the projector, at that time it was a projector kind of thing. You had to check out the movies and get the projector from the media center at the library. The lady at the library told her that she didn't use a third of as many movies as some other people in the same place. So she called me and she said she was going to have a meeting with the superintendent the next day, and could I come and meet with her? Because she was afraid. She said, I'm very nervous. And when I get really nervous, I cry, and I don't remember what was said. I don't make good notes, whatever. So I went to meet with her. She and I met for a little while first, and then we went down, and it was such a small district. The superintendent's office was in the high school. So we went down to the superintendent's office, and he says, yes, you may come in, talking to her. And she walks in, and then he puts his arm across the door and says, not you, you can't come in. And I said, sir, I said, she's very, very nervous. She would just like for me to come. If you want, I don't have to speak, but I would like to be here to make notes for her, and to, to be here just to give her support. He said, you cannot come in. Well, I'm so short, and he was so tall, he'd probably been a basketball player or something, where he'd put his arm across the door. It was way above my head, so I just walked in under his arm. Scared me to death. My knees were shaking so bad, I was about to pass out. I know, but I did it. And I walked in, and I just stood in the back corner of the room, and he said, do you know I could call the sheriff and have you arrested? And I said, yes, sir, you probably could. And he said, oh, what the hell? Just sit down. That's what he said. I sat down, took out my notepad, started making notes. I'd given her the questions she needed to ask him to clarify and all that. And I never had to fight, but I was convinced I was going away to the caboozle, because that's what, I just got trained on that. And I thought, oh my gosh, here's the first thing I do, and I'm going to get arrested. But no, he gave in. And after that, I went in whenever I needed to. He never tried to stop me again. He never acted like he cared for me.
I'm glad.
But I didn't expect him to do that. But I will say to you that this is what, not only that I did that, but the fact that this went all the way to the Board of Education. There was a hearing that lasted till 3:30 in the morning, and the Board of Education voted to give her her job, and they fired the superintendent at the next board meeting. So it was, but one of the things you knew, and I was taught, you can't involve current students. But we had 29 years of past students, past parents, past administrators, past teachers who had worked with her. We hauled half the community in there to testify about what a wonderful teacher she was. And we had the librarian who came voluntarily to tell folks that she did not use more movies, or even as many of the other teachers. And I mean, and then this was the crowning blow. We found out that the superintendent had a nephew who wanted to teach. This is a very small town. He wanted to teach high school social studies, and there were two, and one was a young guy who was a coach. He wasn't going to get rid of him. So guess who he wanted to get rid of? The lady who had taught 29 years. So he could bring his nephew in to teach high school social studies. So all of that happened in my first time really at being the UNISERV director. And and then I think the second thing that really I was most proud of is after I became executive director, I was always very upset because the Constitution in the state of Missouri, which was ratified by the people in 1947, had a statement that said, all employees in the state of Missouri have the right to bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing. The water workers in Springfield, Missouri in 1947 and on into 1948 requested that the city of Springfield, Missouri meet with them and bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing. The city of Springfield refused to meet with them. And that case went all the way to the Missouri Supreme Court. And I always say, the Missouri Supreme Court, in all of their ignorance, ruled that that sentence that I just said, that all employees meant only private employees. It did not mean public employees. And that was a ruling that stood in Missouri all those years. It had never been challenged and it had never been changed. So when I said that we had to create collective bargaining at the local level in the 70s and 80s, that's true, because there was no guarantee, because the Supreme Court had ruled it did not mean that it included public employees. So we had watched carefully, and as executive director, I watched carefully, and finally the right case came. And Missouri GAE in 2005 filed suit to challenge that ruling of the Missouri Supreme Court. And it went all the way, and it was the right Supreme Court this time, by the way. They overturned that ruling. And in 2007, the Missouri Supreme Court ruled that that meant that all public employees in the state of Missouri had the right to bargain. So what we did, Missouri NEA, I didn't pay for it, but I surely loved it, helped do it, and found the right case for it. We gave every public employee, not just teachers, we gave, everybody, police, firemen, everybody, the right to bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing. So those are two things that I'm very proud of.
Peggy, one thing you mentioned this, and this happens so often here in Georgia, and I know Carly and Sharon have heard it, and unfortunately, some of our members say it. We're a right to work state. We can't have a union.
That's not true. Now, Missouri is not a right to work state, but I will say this to you, lots of right to work states have unions. What it means is you cannot have closed shop. You cannot, right to work means, and I still think it's a horrible misnomer. I think that, so many of the people who are against labor and against unions and whatever try to choose the pretty words so they can get people onto their side. But what happens is that, for instance, my son-in-law is an electrician in St. Louis. You cannot get a job as an electrician in the St. Louis area unless you are a member of Local 1, IBEW Local 1. It's a closed shop, okay? It means if you get a job for any of these big contractors or anything, you have to join the union in order to have that job. You have to pay your dues to help pay for what the union does for its members. Now, the union controls, and you pay in through the union to your retirement in IBEW. You pay into the union for your insurances. They all come through the union. You pay into the union for your sick leave and all of those kinds of things. That's all governed by the union. So that's a closed shop, all right? If Missouri became a right to work state, they would lose all of that. What happens too is that you can't force someone to join a union, but you can force them to pay the same or close to the same amount that people pay for union dues by showing how much work you're doing and how much you are helping. So what did it cost you to bargain them that salary? What did it cost you to give them the insurance? What did it cost you to do all these things? So people have to pay their quote fair share. So they don't have to join the union, but they have to pay their fair share. And that's what was going on in California with the NEA. People in California, if you didn't join the NEA in a school district, but you were reaping all the benefits of what the NEA had done, you had to pay your fair share, okay? That's a closed shop, paying your fair share, all of those things a right to work state tries to prevent, okay? So, but you can have a grievance procedure, you can have bargaining, all of those kinds of things, even if you have a right to work state. It really has nothing to do with bargaining. In Missouri, we have the right to bargain, but they passed a law that said we couldn't strike. But our largest school district went on strike. Are they going to fire all the special ed teachers in St. Louis County? That's called the Special School District of St. Louis County, and they provide all the special education services for everyone in St. Louis County. And it was, thousands and thousands of teachers. You think they're going to fire all them? No, they're not. They came, talked to them, and worked it out. So that's how, but it's scary. But sometimes you just have to say, I'm not going to lie down another time and let them walk all over me. I'm going to stand up, and I'm going to stand up for what I believe is right. And I'm going to stand up and do what I think is right. And sometimes you have to say, and I had to say this, and I'm, a couple of times, my job is not worth my dignity. And if it means I lose my job, you know what? I'm going to go out and find another one. When I was a teacher, I had to say that. Because sometimes you just feel like you've been beat down so much that it's hard to even enjoy being a teacher because of the way you're being treated. And that's when you just say enough is enough. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to stand up. And my second year of teaching, or actually it was my third year of teaching, was the first time that I really ever stepped forward and took a stand. And then I just kept on doing it. And I'm sure they just were so sad when they saw me knocking on their door sometimes.
So did you find any differences working in right to work states as opposed to working in states where you have to bargain and negotiate everything?
Say it again, Sharon.
Did you find that there's any difference in working in a right to work state as opposed to working in a state where you have to negotiate and bargain for everything?
Well, first of all, in Missouri, you didn't have to negotiate and bargain for everything, but things that weren't being dealt with, things that weren't being taken care of, that's what you work for, negotiate and bargain for. But there's not a lot of difference in working here. I think there's some difference in attitude. People's attitude, they think they can't do some things that they could do. I think if I were here a longer time, I'd have all kinds of things ready, challenges for people to say, okay, why don't you just try this one time? But I don't think there's a lot of difference. No, I think that being a teacher is the same everywhere. Being a teacher is being a teacher, and you face the same challenges, and you face the same rewards, and you face the same obstacles and everything. And I believe that whether you're in a right to work state or not, you're going to have these same kinds of things. It's just your attitude about what you're going to do about it. It's going to make a difference. So, and I do think that's something that sometimes handicaps some good stuff from getting done, because people think they can't do anything when in fact they can. And for instance, I mean, somebody told me the other day that their board passed a policy that teachers can't talk to the school board. Why, that's crazy. You know, I mean, that's awful. I mean, what if you were married to one? You know,
Yeah.
can you not talk to your husband? I mean, what if it was a relative? What if it, you know, you can always, it's a person in your community.
The parents too.
Huh?
Teachers are parents too. Our children attend those schools.
Yeah, you can talk. My goodness, for God's sake, yes, you can talk to parents. I mean, one of the things that's a requirement in most schools that you have a open communication with parents. And I mean, that's extremely important. And even when, you know, you have concerns, you can share mutual public concerns with parents. That now, I don't think it's appropriate for if you've got some kind of personal issue or evaluation issue, if it's but if it's a school-wide issue, it's certainly appropriate to share it with parents.
And,
I mean, right now, if there are unsafe conditions in schools where you have been working face to face, parents should be a big part of making the decisions that teachers and educators across the board, as well as their kids, have to be safe, and they should go, you know, be demanding that those things be safe. And they should be supporting teachers who are demanding that. So, I mean, I believe that some of the things that can get done very quickly, and some of the people that school boards will listen to very quickly, are parents in their community. And that can be good and that can be bad sometimes, depending on who's bent their ear and who's told them the last thing that they need to be working for.
Peggy, that's one of the things I want us to kind of talk about tonight, because we know what's been happening during COVID, and we know it hasn't been safe in a lot of the areas, and we've still got people who are afraid to speak up.
Yes.
Still saying, don't say my name. You know, so do you have some ideas for us for how we can get our members to understand that they can speak up and they're going to be protected when they do?
Well, one of the best things that they can do is to organize among themselves and go as a group. I mean, work as a group, go as a group, set your goals as a group. And you know, there's great safety in numbers. So that's one of the things that can make people feel much safer, is that if they organize a group within their building or within their organization to go to the board meeting or whatever, that always makes you feel safer. It always makes people feel safer if you get the advice of your UNICEF director. Call your UNICEF director and say, here's what the problem is, and you know, we're not asking you to fix it, but we want you to advise us on how we can make a difference here and how we can fix it. And, you know, what should we say? You know, what can we say? What should we say? And so on. I would say to you, always keep your head when those around you are losing theirs, because you will always come out ahead when you do that. You will always be observed as the one who's calm and cool and knows what they're doing. And people who fly off the handle, and I have seen more than one school board member fly off the handle when a group of teachers comes to make a statement. So it's very important that you keep your calm even when that starts happening. I was elected to a board of trustees for the college in the county where I lived. It was Jefferson Community College, and there were 68 polling places, and I ran for the board of trustees. Nobody had ever campaigned for that seat before. And when somebody said, "Oh, what's your argument? Who are you trying to get rid of?" And I said, "Oh, I don't want to get rid of anyone. I don't even have an argument. I believe that this corner of the county needs to be represented, and they've never had a member on the board of trustees. And I'm running to represent this corner of our county. And I believe that I have a lot of expertise in education, and I believe I could help students and the college be a better place." And that was my answer. Even though there were people all around criticizing me for stepping up and running, I was running against a man who had been on the board for 20 years and had become cynical, I just have to say. And so they built this big idea that I, because I was an NEA member and a union member, they used that word when it was convenient for them, was out to tear down the college. And when I was elected, it shocked them all. And they were the other board members, I think there were 7 on the board, and the other board members at first were very cool toward me. And the last 2 years, our terms were 5-year terms. And the last 2 years, they elected me president. Those board members elected me president of that board because they found out that I cared about the kids and I cared about the college and I cared about the community, and I'd worked my butt off to do all the things that needed to be done for them. And they elected me president of their board 2 years in a row. I didn't run again because it was also during that time when I decided to become a UNICEF director. And so the last 2 or 3 years when I was president, I was driving from Jefferson City back to Jefferson County, which, like Georgia, just because it's Jefferson City doesn't mean it's in Jefferson County. So I found all that out today when I was trying to figure out where all the locals were, and I was working on these UNICEF grants. So that was 2.5 hours away, but I would drive back for all the meetings and whatever, but I decided not to run again. So, but it was a wonderful experience. And being a Board of Education member, it actually broadened my perspective. You wear a different hat than the union hat. You wear a different hat than the employee hat. And it really helps you to understand a lot. And I think it helped prepare me to be an executive director. Because sometimes, they used to, when I had to bargain, as you well know, as the executive director, had to bargain with our staff. And sometimes if they got angry with me, they'd call me the superintendent, and I thought, yeah, well, sometimes I may have to act like a superintendent because the superintendent has much of the same job description that an executive director has. You have to look out for the financial well-being of the association. You have to try to look out for everyone. Now, I'm not saying all superintendents do that, but that's what their job description is. You have to look out for the employees, and you have to look out for your clients, your students, that's what you have to do. And you have to have all those things in mind as you make decisions. And that's very important.
Okay, we've got a question here. Hey, it's not a question. Somebody put a comment in, but Peggy, I know you're going to have an answer for them.
Okay.
This person said that people might balk at organizing using the example of the Amazon plant in Alabama.
People in the plant balked at organizing?
No, people here in Georgia, our colleagues, educators here in Georgia,
Might balk.
might balk because of that, what happened there.
And can you tell me what happened at the Amazon plant? They were fired or what?
They weren't fired, and it's still happening that
Okay.
the company was trying to convince them that they would be laid off if they
Okay.
voted for the union.
Well, one of the things that I need to say is that even though you have bargaining, even though you organize, even though all of those things happen, it just, you don't give a, if you're the superintendent, you're the school board, you don't break the bank, you don't give it away. And guess what? Teachers don't want to break the bank. Educators don't want to break the bank. Do you think that we don't want a job? No, we want people to be fair and honest and transparent with us. One of the things that I did as a teacher, when I was doing bargaining and negotiations, I took a course in school finance. And I learned how to predict the financial condition of a district. And if the state gave us so much money, I learned how to calculate, according to the school foundation formula and everything else, how much money our school district was going to get. I also learned the flow of property taxes when they come in, and how you can calculate that, because our district was saying, oh, well, we have to keep 40% balance because there's 2 or 3 months at the beginning of the year when we get nothing. Well, you do have to keep some. There has to be some money there to carry you through. But the fact is that all state monies came in every month. They didn't come in at just when property taxes were coming in. So by the second month, if you had a good balance, by the second month, you'd built up enough that by the third month, when you started getting some property taxes in, and then the fourth month, you got lots of property taxes in, and so on, then you knew you could see the flow of money coming into a district. So you could create a very sensible argument about 18% should be the maximum that you need to keep as a balance. And here's why. And they didn't like that at all. Talk about keeping your head about you while those around you are losing theirs. When I was making that point and showed them the flow of money for the last 3 years, the finance person in the district took his glasses off and threw them across the table at me and said, where did you get those figures? And what was funny is this was a table that we had put together, and the whole middle of it was blank, was empty. There wasn't a table there, and his glasses were sliding off and fell down in the middle of that table, and he couldn't see without them. And so they called a caucus and asked us if we could leave the room, and then he had somebody crawl under the table and get his glasses for him. But we knew what was going on. But you just keep your calm while those around you are losing theirs. But you know what you do? You do your homework. You practice. You know that what you've got is real. You take a look, because in Missouri, as I would assume it is here, every one of the reports that they filed is public information. Mm-hmm. And the year-end reports are all public information. So you learn how to take all those reports, you learn how to read them, you learn how much money they're carrying forward, you see where they're spending their money, and everybody's salary in every district in Missouri is public information. Nobody's salary is secret. I would assume it's that way here. It's
is.
all public information. So we used to get that, and we would make copies of it and put in all the teacher lounges so people could see what everyone was making. Well, that upset them to no end. But it's only fair. It's their money. It's tax money. It's the community's money. Everybody should know what everybody is making. And so those are just little simple kinds of things but do your homework and learn those kind of things. The best course I ever took was school finance because it gave me so much good information. It also helps me be a better executive director because I can now go through all that stuff, and I can look and say, no, this is not right. We got to go back and see what was recorded here because this is not the right figure. Or it helps you learn how to estimate how much you can save with a lease, or estimate or try to work on negotiating insurances, or all of those kinds of things. You don't necessarily learn those things as a teacher.
Right.
One of the hardest things I ever had to do was when the highway department decided they were going to take our building and put an on-ramp there. And they were going to just take it. And they said, well, we'll pay you the, going rate. And I said, no, what are we going to, and learning how to negotiate with them, learning how to deal with them and they told me, they said, nobody ever sues the Highway Department of Missouri and wins. Well, you know what I found out? They're right, but guess what? If you threaten them, they're going to give you what you want. Because I kept on and they gave me what I wanted. No, I didn't win a lawsuit, but I won what we needed so we could get another plot of land, and build another building. And they gave us enough money, and they had to give us enough money in order to do that. So, those are the kinds of things that a superintendent has to deal with. You can deal with them in two different ways. You can deal with them transparently and everybody knows what's going on, can get behind them. You can involve all kinds of people in your decision making, or it can be hush hush, secretive, and everybody suspects that something's wrong.
Okay, Peggy, I'm going to depress us all. Carly, I didn't forget, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. We do this every week. I've been keeping track of the number of children in Georgia who are with COVID-19. And so as of today, 98,111 children in Georgia. And we were talking about this last week, the fact that when the pandemic first started, I remember when it was all over the news that we were about to have 100,000 cases in the United States. And we're getting close to 100,000 cases in children in Georgia. And nobody's talking about it. So it's just amazing to me that we are that close and that we've had that many children impacted who have had this illness. And we don't know what's going to happen to them 5 years from now because they had it, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So I'll stop there, Carly. I won't fully depress us this evening. Peggy, we got about 5 minutes left. And I'm going to ask you this because we know that sometime soon we're going to have a new permanent executive director. So first, I have put in the chat our link. If you are not a member of GAE already, we need you to join us so we can get some of these things that we need for our students, for our colleagues, so that we can be the ones learning how to bargain without a law. And so we can be that person that's willing to stand up and not afraid anymore. Peggy, give us our best advice as we finish this evening for GAE as we continue moving forward.
Well, I think you're on the right track. I think that we have turned a corner. I see our membership beginning to grow again. I know that we're hiring back some of our personnel. That's exciting because it's hard to do all this work with a scant crew. I will say too that I believe that you've got a lot of wonderful, wonderful causes and things that are creating such obstacles for teachers. The waiver law is, I never heard of such a thing. When I came here, and one of the things that Lisa told me, one of the first things she told me, she said, I have to tell you that we've got this waiver law, and school districts can waive, and it's supposedly you can waive things from Georgia law that are impediments to achievement for kids. So what have they waived? Some districts have waived duty-free lunch for teachers. Some districts have, I mean, how can that help achievement for kids? Some districts have waived planning periods. Some districts have waived class sizes. There's all kinds of research on how class sizes can affect the learning of kids negatively. If the higher up you go in class size, the less one-on-one time you have with a kid, and it can drastically affect the performance of a child. So that kind of thing is, you must step up. You must make your voice heard, because I don't believe that school districts are being held accountable for this law, because I don't think you can have one eye and 2 cents and argue that those things are helping student achievement. Not at all. And, you know, they're such a detriment to a teacher when you don't even get a duty-free lunch of 20 minutes. Such a detriment to a teacher when you can't even have a planning period to get ready for class. Such a detriment when you have 35 kids in a class and you know you're not giving children the right one-on-one time. That hurts so much. And all kinds of other things that they're waiving that don't have anything to do with helping the achievement of a child. So I think that that's one thing you really, really need to be battling. The other thing is the loss. And I know that this General Assembly here in Georgia argued that all the COVID money that's coming in is taking the place of the money they've cut. Well, we don't want them to supplant the money. Right. That was not what COVID money was sent here for. In the CARES Act or in this ARP Act, that's not what that money is for. It's not to take the place of the cuts that the Georgia Assembly has made to education. Those cuts are deep. That's a gash that's going to take years to heal. And so it's important that you make your voices heard, but it's so important that it be heard by a collective group of people. And it's important that teachers and other educators, ESP and everyone else buy into this. Make themselves know that they're a part of something that's good and is going to help public education in Georgia. The voucher movement is so harmful to the funding of public education. And for the General Assembly members, some of them to argue that the vouchers were going to remove enough kids from public education that in fact we were going to be better off because they were not there anymore is crazy. That's a crazy, crazy argument. The voucher movement all across this nation is being fueled by a group called the American Legislative Exchange Council. And you know it's true, because if you go around to all these states, you'll find the same laws with the same words being proposed in state after state after state. And it's not that they all read each other's minds. They have been provided this information by the American Legislative Exchange Council and the groups, that's the big corporations that funnel money into those groups. And so it's a battle all the time. You don't know when they're going to sneak something else in, or they're going to try to pass a voucher. And I've written an article that's going to get published coming up here soon. It's called "A Voucher by Any Other Name is Still a Voucher." And you can call it special ed scholarships. You can call it everything in the world you want to call it, but it's still a voucher, and it still takes public money and gives it to private schools. And there's obviously not enough for the public schools because they're cutting it drastically, but they're jumping up and down to send it to the private schools. So it's important that those things be watched and be worked on and be battled. You have to, for the sake of public education. We can't lose that battle because it's the foundation of our democracy. And, you just got to keep fighting. That's my last word.
Keep fighting.
Keep fighting.
That's what we're going to do. We're going to keep fighting. Peggy, thank you so much for joining us this week. I feel like we could sit here and just listen for another 3 hours, but we know we can't. So I want to thank everyone here who's watching us this week.
And tell everybody who's on that I'm going to give the final keynote speech at the Leadership Development Academy and tell a lot of other stories. So,
yep, that's it. So if you are not a member, I put the link in there. If you are a member, check. We will have the registration information for our Leadership Development Academy, and we will continue fighting, and we will see you next week, Wednesday at 6:30. Thank you all. Everybody have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Right.